This week on Just Solutions. Access to abortion is declining in an increasing number of states. The Texas Supreme Court has now effectively shut down a federal challenge to the state's ban on abortion after 6 weeks of pregnancy. It's the most restrictive abortion law in the country, and other states are following suit. Florida's legislature passed a bill that would ban abortion after 15 weeks. And in Kentucky, the State House has voted to pass new restrictions that could effectively shut down clinics in the state. Our guest today is Amanda Allen, Senior Counsel and Director with the Lawyering Project, one of the organisations that has been challenging the Texas abortion ban in the courts. From Free Speech TV, Just Solutions. Amanda, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for being our guest today.
Thanks for having me, Maeve, and thanks for covering this issue.
Well, let's put this into context. We'll, of course, talk about what's happening in all of these states that are passing copycat laws or going even further, like in Missouri. We'll talk about that, but let's begin by putting all of this into some kind of context. This isn't just something that's happened in the last year or so. It's estimated that since 2011, in fact, between 2011 and 2019, 483 laws that restrict access to abortion were passed. So this is really part of a wave. Put this into the bigger context.
Absolutely. And I think that background is really important for your viewers to understand, because what we've been really experiencing in this country is a sustained assault on access to abortion services, really for the last 10 to 11 years. In 2010, the midterm elections that year really brought in a wave of conservative legislators in state houses across the country. And so as a result of that, in 2011, we saw a huge new wave of abortion restrictions being considered and ultimately becoming law. And that pattern really continued for the next 10 years. In 2011, it was really about kind of regulating abortion out of existence. And so putting restrictions on medication abortion that weren't medically necessary, requiring things like hospital admitting privileges that physicians who provide abortion care do not actually need for the procedure to be safe. But it was really just a way of making it more difficult to provide care. Requiring abortion facilities to be retrofitted to essentially be mini hospitals. Those were the types of laws that we saw in the early 2010s really proliferate at the state level. And all of that culminated in a 2016 Supreme Court decision in the case called Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt. And in that case, the Supreme Court looked at a pair of Texas abortion restrictions that did just what I talked about. They basically had the effect of shutting down about half of the clinics in the state of Texas. Requiring hospital admitting privileges, requiring abortion clinics to become ambulatory surgical centers. Neither requirement is medically necessary, and all the evidence showed that it had the opposite impact, actually, and really detracted patient health and safety in the state. The Supreme Court, which was made up of a very different set of justices at the time, struck down both of those Texas laws. And in a very strong decision, the Supreme Court held that Roe v. Wade is good law, it's settled law, and that in order for an abortion restriction to pass constitutional muster, its benefits have to outweigh its burdens. And so the court really looked closely at the effect, the practical reality of shutting down those Texas abortion clinics, and concluded that those laws were not constitutional and they had to be struck down. And I provide all of that background because that was only 6 years ago, right? And now we're in a situation where the Supreme Court has twice refused to intervene in the most restrictive abortion law in the country that Texas has again enacted, as you set up in your intro. And so we're really seeing a huge whiplash in terms of the right to abortion as the U.S. Supreme Court is seeing it in just a very short amount of time. Now, since that 2016 Supreme Court decision came down, abortion opponents did not back down. They did not say, okay, well, we've lost this one. These types of laws are clearly unconstitutional. We'll stop trying to pass them. The opposite happened. They doubled and even tripled down. in the ensuing years. And that's when we saw a huge spate of these so-called fetal heartbeat ban bills get enacted into law. Those are the laws that would ban abortion, usually after about 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is before most people even know they're pregnant. And so we saw states pass ban after ban after ban. That 15-week ban in Mississippi that the Supreme Court is reviewing right now, and we expect a decision on that in June of this year, was also part of this sort of post-2016 wave of abortion restrictions. And so, we're in this situation right now where states have just become more and more and more emboldened because they see the changes at the U.S. Supreme Court, and they're thinking to themselves, what's stopping us from at least trying to ban abortion entirely?
Well, as you said, the Supreme Court in 2016 had a very, very different ideological makeup than what we have now. And the very conservative justices that have been appointed since 2016, banning abortion essentially was really at the heart of, I think many people would say, why they were chosen to be on the court. So the court has played and will continue to play such an outsized role in women's health.
That's right. And President Trump at the time said that was really his litmus test for, for appointing a nominee to the court was, will they effectively turn their backs on 50 years of settled constitutional law and take away this right that people have enjoyed and really based their lives on for the last half a century. And that's how we are where we are right now. We have a 6-3 court that is stacked with conservative justices, many of whom have felt Roe versus Wade was wrongly decided for their whole careers, and a few of whom are newer to the court. But we don't really have to guess how this is going to turn out because of the way we saw the court just turn their backs on Texans twice and refuse to intervene in a law that has really decimated abortion access in the state of Texas.
Well, of course, the states or the Supreme Court is expected to release its decision or weigh in on the fate of Roe v. Wade by June. So there's still a lot, as you said, it's not difficult to guess how many of the folks on the court will actually weigh in. But what's happening at the states right now is alarming, albeit this has been going on really since 2011. But what we're seeing are the Texas bill, but then so many copycat bills. And in the introduction, I mentioned several of those states, but I didn't mention Missouri, which is imposing even further restrictions. One of them directly puts women's health in danger. It endangers the life of women because of an attempt to ban abortions in the case of ectopic pregnancies, which are never viable and can actually threaten the life of a woman. So when we're seeing laws that are completely disconnected from biology, from medicine, that is very alarming.
Absolutely. I mean, that bill was really, really striking in its just complete ignorance of how pregnancy works, what an ectopic pregnancy is. As you said, they are never, in 100% of the cases, they are not viable. There is nothing to be done about an ectopic pregnancy other than treat it, because it is very, very dangerous for a person to continue an ectopic pregnancy. They could experience a rupture of their fallopian tubes. They could go into septic shock. It's very, very dangerous. And so to see politicians really just completely ignoring medicine, completely ignoring science to push this radical agenda, it's really alarming. I mean, I suspect that the person who wrote that bill just didn't know what an ectopic pregnancy was, but that's a problem, right? We shouldn't have lawmakers interfering in these private personal medical decisions. And this is just kind of, I think, one of the more extreme examples of that. We've also seen a similar example of this interference in medicine and sort of politicians playing doctor with these bills that require providers to essentially lie to their patients and say that a medication abortion can be reversed, which we know is not grounded in science. It's not the standard of care. And so the state sort of enforcing providers to be its mouthpiece in delivering this information to patients. We've seen these laws pass in several states across the country over the past few years, and more states are considering legislation like that this session. And so I think that's another example of, politicians really meddling in this area where they have no business to be.
Well, another law in Missouri under consideration would be a ban around traveling across state lines to access abortion. And this gets into how different states are tackling, some restricting abortion access, and other states are embracing folks from those states. And we'll talk about the intersection of those in a second. But the Missouri ban would have a significant impact, because not only could you not access an abortion in Missouri itself, you would then be prohibited from crossing state lines. So talk a little bit about that and the impact of that law.
Yes. So the Missouri bill is SB 8 on steroids, right? So it's taking the SB 8 model and saying, okay, we are going to allow basically a bounty hunter scheme to enforce an abortion ban. And going further than Texas, like you said, it says that Missouri residents can't even access abortion outside of Missouri state borders. This goes against every concept of federalism, every concept within our, how our nation's laws are supposed to work. You can't tell people what to do in other states. And yet Missouri is apparently going to try and see what happens if they try to legislate that. It goes beyond just somebody providing an abortion to a Missouri resident. It's anyone who helps that person leave the state. It's anyone who helps pay for that abortion. It even tries to police websites that just provide information to Missouri residents about how to access an abortion. And so it's really, we're seeing kind of this escalation of tactics. And it's very clear to me that states are not going to stop at just trying to ban abortion within their borders. They are going to continue to sort of press this issue and see how far they can go. And the last thing I'll say about this bill is that what's clear to me is that these bills are just about control, right? And we're seeing this in state after state, not even just on abortion rights. Idaho, the Idaho legislature is considering a bill that would criminalize parents who want to help their children access gender-affirming medical care. And so this concept of we're not just going to attack the constitutional rights and the personal decision-making of people in our state, we're going to make sure that they can't even access that care elsewhere. We're seeing this across issues and in different states. And it's really quite alarming.
Well, we would love to hear from our viewers. Drop us a note on social media. Let us know your thoughts on all of these laws and how the Supreme Court is or is not weighing in, and what your thoughts are on the future of Roe v. Wade. We are expected to have a decision from the Supreme Court by June. And let us know your thoughts in the comments section, but connect with us also on social media. And don't forget that Just Solutions is also a podcast, so you can subscribe to that and never miss an episode. Well, Amanda, the fact that we have states like Kansas that are seeing an influx already of folks from Texas and Missouri because of the existing bans there, but now we're having these bans in states being introduced, like in Missouri, where you can't even cross state lines. I mean, this is creating this situation. It's like we have some states like Colorado and California that instead of introducing bans, they're actually introducing legislation to protect abortion access because of their concerns about what the Supreme Court could potentially do around Roe v. Wade, but also acknowledging what's happening in these other states. So talk about, say, the impact on a state like Kansas that's already seeing an influx from neighboring states which have bans, and how then maybe lawmakers in those states are saying, well, maybe we need to enact bans here. I mean, this is really going to create a patchwork quilt of medical care for women in this country.
Absolutely. And the first thing I'll say is that what we know about abortion bans is that they really only operate as bans on people who can't afford to evade them, right? And so people who need abortions are resilient. They will raise the money to fill up their gas tank and get to a clinic in a nearby state. They will find childcare so that somebody can watch their kids so that they can go to their abortion appointment. These bans are really only operating as bans on the people with the least means and the least access to healthcare already, right? And so that's why we're seeing estimates of about 1,400 Texans every month since SB 8 has been in effect have left the state to access abortion care. So it's so clear to me that these bans are not really about, protecting life or the other things that that the politicians behind them are saying they're for. They're really about controlling people. They're really about saying, we get to say what you do with your body, because people will leave the state to access care they need. The other part of this is that most people who access abortions are already parents. And so this right to abortion is just as much about a right for people to be able to parent the children they have with dignity, because nobody knows the costs, the burdens, the difficulties that come with raising children than somebody who is already a parent. And so that's another piece of this, that we know that abortion bans fall also hardest on people who already have children to take care of. Now, in terms of the influx of patients traveling to other states, you're absolutely right. We are seeing that in states that neighbor Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, like you said, Kansas, Louisiana. These are states that are already down to only 1 or 2 abortion clinics. And so you can imagine those wait times. You can imagine how hard it is for people to access care out of state. And that's not even considering the travel, the costs associated with that, finding childcare, finding the money to fill up your gas tank a few times. And keep in mind that when people leave Texas to go to one of those states for an abortion, they're not going to a state with friendlier laws. They're going to a state that has a 48 or a 72-hour waiting period, a state that requires you to make 2 trips, one for a counseling session where the provider is forced to give information that the state is making them give, and then one for the abortion. And so we're talking about people leaving their home state to access care and then being subjected to all of these other restrictions that have proliferated over the past decade. And so, this is, again, it just shows the resilience of people who need to access this care, that they are willing to go to these great lengths in these other states. On the flip side, as you alluded to, we have states in this country that want to step in right now and make access easier. Vermont, for example, is considering a constitutional amendment that will go to the voters this midterm election season, that will codify the right to abortion in its state constitution. As you said, California is considering a number of protective measures. Maryland is also considering laws that would a bill that would both repeal some of the existing restrictions in state law, but also enshrine more protections in state law. And so we will be seeing kind of that push and pull this session, because bear in mind, the majority of Americans do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. The majority of Americans, in fact, the majority of Texans oppose laws like SB 8. And so we are going to see that kind of that other side of this issue in full force in states that are able to pass those protective measures. And so we will be watching this session, both, to see if those laws like the Missouri law end up passing, and also what happens in states like California, Vermont, Maryland, Colorado.
So what can be done? I know your organization, the Lawyering Project, is very much taking the legal route to challenge these laws. The Texas Supreme Court, though, has just ruled that final legal challenge, which was really trying to get to the medical boards, challenging them, that cannot be pursued. So it seems that particular legal avenue is blocked now, and particularly since the Supreme Court has declined to weigh in. So what can be done? We mentioned some states that are passing laws to protect their own abortion rights. But what can be done then to help people in Texas, people in Missouri? We'll talk about the future of Roe v. Wade in just a moment. But aside, say, from the legal route and maybe legislation, are there things that can be done at this point?
Absolutely. I mean, I would encourage your viewers to donate to your local abortion fund, donate to Texas abortion funds, donate to Missouri abortion funds. If you're not sure what your local abortion fund is, or you want to see a list of the funds in a given state, go to abortionfunds.org. These are groups that are really the heart and soul of getting people the care they need on the ground in these states. These are often volunteer run, hardworking people who are trying to get people rides to clinics, booking flights to out-of-state providers, booking bus tickets, providing cash for just the abortion itself, all of the logistical support and all the financial support that people in Texas need right now, and possibly in other states if we see some of these other bans take effect. That work is really being done by abortion funds on the ground. So that's the first thing I would say.
And we are, of course, in an important election year with the midterms looming and other important elections like the Texas gubernatorial race. And we know that this will be part of many candidates' platform. And so connect what we're also seeing to voting rights, because I know that there's a direct connection between gerrymandering, between the, very right-wing conservative takeover of many of these state legislatures and these very restrictive abortion bills coming in. I mean, we've had organizations like NARAL saying, we're not going to endorse candidates unless they're supporting voting rights legislation as well, because there really is that connection. So as we are headed into the midterms and some of those other important local races around some of these states that are enacting some of these laws, what do people need to have in mind as they're either headed to the ballot box or questioning candidates or, just considering the outcome of the midterms?
Well, I think it's really important to draw that connection between voting rights and the right to abortion, because I just said, right, the majority of Americans do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned. So how can it be that we're in this situation where that court case really hangs in the balance? And the answer is gerrymandering, right? We have a situation where a lot of states in this country are not being, the elections are not really being conducted in a way that makes sure that every voice counts, every vote counts. And so I think that's a really, really important issue to consider as it intersects with our issue, right? This is not about the majority of this country wants to see this access to abortion being taken away. It's quite the opposite. But because of gerrymandering, a lot of the state houses in this country that are really able to sort of push these measures through are really built in a way that that is allowing for this. And so I think as we approach the midterm elections, I just encourage people to consider the pro-choice voting record of the candidates for office. Remember to think locally too, right? This fight has happened at the state level since Roe v. Wade was decided. And so this is really something where local politics, state level politics really, really matter, because these are the folks that are passing these laws and that are in the legislature, that are proposing these laws, and in the governor's houses that are signing these bills into law. And so I really encourage people to really look into the candidates at all levels in your election races this midterm.
Well, as we have mentioned, the Supreme Court is expected to release its decision on Roe v. Wade by June. We know how conservative leaning the court is now, and the fact that many of those justices were appointed because of their opposition to Roe. So, I mean, what are your thoughts in the last few minutes that we have, Amanda, about the future of Roe, but then what goes after that? Like, what do we wake up to the day after that Supreme Court decision is released?
Well, I'm very concerned. I think everyone in this field is very concerned, because the questions that the justices were asking in that hearing at oral argument in that Jackson Women's Health Organization case really, really kind of, they tipped their hand a little bit as to how they were leaning. It really did seem like we were not going to leave this Supreme Court session with a decision that said the right to abortion remains intact and Roe v. Wade is still the law of the land. There's still a couple of different ways the decision could go. And so we won't know until we know, right? But I do think there is very serious reason to be concerned that we we'll see a situation, like you said, where there's a patchwork where states are free to ban abortion, say after 15 weeks, like the Mississippi law, or even earlier. It really depends on the court's holding and the court's reasoning. But that is kind of what we're all looking to and kind of holding our breath about as we approach June. So yeah, I think we're really looking at a country where people are going to be traveling to get care. People are going to be turning more to telemedicine and other technologies to access medication abortion. But we are certainly prepared for a situation where there is no longer a federal constitutional right to abortion.
Are there any bright spots that we can look to? I mean, it seems pretty grim when we look at what's happening at a state level, when we look to, potential decision against Roe v. Wade. Are there bright spots in this?
Well, one thing I'll say is that we have to be in this for the long game, because our opposition has never given up. Roe v. Wade has been the law of the land for nearly half a century, and they have never stopped trying to overturn that decision, passing these incrementally restrictive laws, culminating in now a situation where we have abortion effectively banned in one state, and the Supreme Court has done nothing about that. And so our opposition has never given up, and we can't give up either. We have to be in this for the long haul. And so I think that's one bright spot, is that we're not going to give up. We're not going anywhere after this decision comes down, whatever it may be.
And it is interesting that a lot of abortion rights activists are looking now to other countries. I mean, I'm from Ireland, and when I was growing up, it had the most restrictive abortion bans, I think, almost in the world. It was completely outlawed under every circumstance, and women were forced to travel. There were these well-known routes on the ferries and on the planes to go to Britain. And that was overturned by a vote of the people. And we're seeing a huge amount of activism in countries like Poland and also in Latin American countries too. So do you think at this point the US needs to look to other countries which traditionally have had even stricter abortion bans that are successfully changing the laws in their countries?
Yes, I was just going to say, look at what's going on in Latin America. It shows the power of people rising up and saying, this is not acceptable. We need to have these laws removed. And so I think, it may be the case that we're looking, sort of internationally at a situation where the United States keeps falling back further and further behind when it comes to basic human rights.
Well, Amanda Allen with the Lawyering Project, it's been great to have you as a guest. Thank you very much for being with us on Just Solutions today.
Thanks for having me.
And don't forget that Just Solutions is available as a podcast, so you can subscribe to it wherever you get your podcasts and listen anytime and never miss an episode. And don't forget to connect with us on social media. Let us know your thoughts on these topics. Drop us a comment, and don't forget to tune in same time, same place for another from Free Speech TV, Just Solutions.